This is Speaking with the Enemy on the Ticats Audio Network. Here is Louie Butko.
Yes, the show is Speaking with the Enemy. The enemy this week, a familiar face, because for the second time in 4 weeks, it's the Ottawa Redblacks, and we remember how that game ended in Hamilton just a few short weeks ago. Could have gone into overtime, like the Redblacks have gone into overtime, becoming the first team in CFL history to win consecutive overtime games. And to discuss that, we bring in our friend AJ Jakubec from TSN 1200, the play-by-play voice of the Redblacks. And AJ, you've called a lot of fun games, Miracle on Bank Street, you've called Grey Cups. But these last 2 weeks, as a broadcaster, when it's going back and forth, when there's points on both sides, these must have been a lot of fun games.
They have been, Louie, and it's been a long 3 years. Ottawa's had an interesting history since coming back into the league. They were 2-16 out of the gate. They came back with the best season in Ottawa football history, win total wise, with 12. That was the year of 2nd and 25, Burris to Ellingson. They ended up losing the Grey Cup. They had 4 pretty good years, though. They won 42 games in 4 years, went to 3 Grey Cups, won one of them, some really entertaining games. And then it just fell off a cliff. So it's not like this is a long-suffering franchise. The long-suffering happened between 1981 and 2015. 34 years between Grey Cup appearances and a couple of stretches when they didn't even have a team. So I think it's an interesting thing to look at from that perspective because, okay, they're not necessarily long-suffering. They won a Grey Cup within the last decade. But these last 3 years have been so bad. And you look at a 50-game stretch where they won 8 games. That's 16% over the course of 3 seasons. And then you had a missed season in there as well with COVID. So to see the buzz back in Ottawa right now over these last couple of weeks, to me, that's what's most gratifying. But, yeah, this is the Canadian Football League that I grew up with, watching in the 80s and 90s, where just so unpredictable. And that's the CFL at its best. And I think we've seen a lot of that in recent years, but 2021, quite frankly, wasn't the best year entertainment-wise for the CFL. I think 2022 took some steps in the right direction that way. And then you look at the last couple of weeks, and it's not just the 2 Ottawa games, which I think are probably front and center, but you had a great game between Toronto and Montreal. You had a terrific football game between Saskatchewan and Calgary, amongst others. So, yeah, it feels good just to hear the buzz here in Ottawa about this football team again.
Yeah, to that point, we were talking about their franchise losing streak at home. Just the struggles at TD Place, and you're obviously connected to the city. I was so quick to jump on some people who are making the Argos all about Chad Kelly, that he was the savior of the CFL. But it is amazing what a couple of good weeks of quarterbacking can do for a fan base. And Dustin Crum, really, 24 years old. Where was he on the depth chart to start the season? Where he is now? What have you seen from this kid?
Yeah, and first of all, just to kind of touch on your point about Chad Kelly and Dustin Crum, and we saw it last year with Nathan Rourke. I think it's not only great for the franchise here, it's great for the Canadian Football League in general when you have players like this at the quarterback position, because I think what I've said recently is I think the talent top to bottom in the Canadian Football League outside of the quarterback position has never been better, never been deeper. And to me, that's, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that's a problem, because the defenses are so good that if you don't have experienced quality quarterbacks that know the CFL, it's a tough game. And that's where you get certain games like Saskatchewan beating Edmonton 12-11 earlier this year, for example. So this league relies so heavily. It's such a team. Football is such an interesting sport because it's such a team sport in almost every way, but there's no more important position in all the sports, and it's not even close. Whether you talk about center ice or defense or goaltenders in hockey, whether you talk about strikers or central midfielders in soccer, or whatever you might decide, nothing is close to how important the quarterback position is, because it makes everything else function. And last year, I watch almost all the games in the Canadian Football League, but I'm a busy guy. I've got other duties, call other games. I've got, personal life and all that.
So you're allowed to have one.
So on average, I'm watching, if I could, I'd watch all 4 games a week. On average, I'm probably watching 3. And I would make plans, for example, if I had an off night on a weekend last year, I would make plans. All right, there's Friday or Saturday night, and let's say the Redblacks played on Thursday. When's Nathan Rourke playing? Oh, he's playing Friday night? Okay, I'm watching the game. We'll hang out Saturday. That's the way it was for me, because he was must-watch television each and every week. And I think with Chad Kelly, and certainly these first couple of weeks starting with Dustin Crum, it feels like that with him as well. I love the buzz around the Canadian Football League. I love the buzz, again, around Ottawa, not just with Redblacks fans and hardcore football fans, but just casual people tuning in and seeing, oh, this guy looks like he's fun to watch, and he is. So, yeah, and in terms of Crum and his pedigree, like, not a guy that came out of nowhere. He's MAC Player of the Year in 2021 at Kent State, and that's the same conference that produced Nathan Rourke as well. But you look at that, and then you look at the next year, and he attended Kansas City Chiefs camp, and he came straight to the Canadian Football League. I think that was the key, because we've lost a lot in this league of quarterbacks that have been going to the XFL, to the USFL, and to have Crum come right away and not test his options with those other leagues, I think was so big, because he got to learn the game last year on the practice roster, second half of the season, and then he came into training camp where everything wasn't new to him, and looked great in camp, looked excellent in preseason in Guelph against the Toronto Argonauts, and there was just absolutely no way that they were going to let either Dustin Crum or Tyree Adams go based on what we saw from them. They knew they had 2 really good young quarterbacks, and Adams won his first CFL start this year as well before getting injured. So I think, it's been fun to watch, but just really interesting to see his progression week to week. And he's a rocket scientist. That's what he took at Kent State, aeronautical engineering. So he's a smart guy, and you can see him processing more and more things each and every week. So, yeah, it feels like the sky's the limit for him, but so far a great start for sure in the Dustin Crum era here in Ottawa.
I don't want to get too off topic because, there's lots to talk about when it comes to this Redblacks team, a lot to talk about when it comes to Friday night, big East Division matchup, obviously, for both teams. But you and I have both been around, obviously knows this league. It's so good. We love it. But to market it to Kent State, to market it in a different, the CBS Sports deal. It's on prime time in the U.S. Occasionally. The streaming deal. This is a big opportunity for the league. The Chad Kelly, the Dustin Crums, guys who have names down south, recent success down south in colleges, to really grab a new fan base, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so, and certainly the American deal is going to be important for the Canadian Football League, but to me, the bread and butter of the Canadian Football League is in Canada. Yeah. And to me, I'm excited to see TV numbers up in Canada. It's not that I'm not excited. I think it is important. The United States loves football at every level, but the reality is the schedule's not changing.
Yeah.
Maybe it moves up a couple of weeks, but they're not. I think, when you go back to those CFL, XFL talks, when you talk to people, I think that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks is they were never able to agree even on when to play a season, because the Canadian Football League has traditions, and it doesn't mean you have to play deep into November, but Labor Day is important. And I think fall football is important in the Canadian Football League. No one wants to play in March. It doesn't make sense here. Weather stinks. Hockey's still the number one sport in this country, and so it was never going to work that way. So, look, in the end, I think it's important that you've got some extra revenue from whether it's globally in the United States and all that type of stuff. But the bread and butter is still going to be here in Canada, and making this league work and thrive and succeed in this country. And just to have people care. Yeah, it's great that Julian Edelman's tweeting about the league, and Chad Johnson and other people as well. But most important are the people here in Canada going to attend games? Are they going to watch games on TSN? Are they going to listen to games on the Ticats audio network or TSN 1200 in Ottawa? that to me is what's most important. And I think we're seeing some positive signs this year around the league in terms of interest level, which is great to see.
And it certainly helps when, TSN SportsCenter can have highlights that are exciting enough to open a show, and they have had with these Ottawa Redblacks games. 852 yards on offense in these last 2 weeks. Of course, both overtime wins. 441 last week in the win against Calgary. What is it about Kahari Jones and Dustin Crum and the rest of the pieces that are clicking? What do you think is the key to this success? Is it just a magical performance by Dustin Crum? It seems like a lot of things are going right for this offense.
Yeah, and when you talk about the yards and the points and the wins, I mean, against Winnipeg and Calgary too, and maybe Calgary's not as good as they have been
in Calgary though
over the course of the last decade. But yeah, that they were coming off a big win, and Jake Maier threw for a career high in his career passing yards with over 450, and yeah, so those are two pretty good opponents to beat as well. But I think the success, and this is by design. Sean Burke talked about this from day one. They wanted to be a dominant team at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And when you look at the offense the last couple of weeks, they've had success running the football. That's been the key, and it starts with the O-line. It helps it to have a quarterback in Dustin Crum that is mobile as he is. You've got a 1-2 punch. It hasn't really mattered who the running backs have been. It could be Devontae Williams or Demontre Tuggle. It could be ex-Tiger Cat Jackson Bennett. It could be Ante Milanovic-Litre, who had 2 touchdowns last week and a big rumbling north-south type Mike Allstott running back. So I think to have the running game succeed, that gives your quarterback a chance to do some things. And, I don't even think we've seen anywhere near the best from this receiving core, because Shaq Evans, I expect him to be ready to go for his first game. And I thought he was the best receiver at camp for the Redblacks. So that's a huge addition. Unfortunately, has had some injury troubles the last few years, but, bad luck, because a broken finger, I mean, that's not something that's injury prone. That's just bad luck. So that's what he suffered. He should be good to go. Braylon Addison's probably just a handful of weeks away, and I don't have to tell you about the type of impact that he can make when healthy. But, you've got Justin Hardy, you got Jalen Acklin, you've got Nate Bahar, who's one of the best Canadian receivers in this league. And I think that group is only going to be better going forward if and when Evans and Addison are both joining the fray as well. So there's a lot to like, and certainly Kahari Jones, he's got an interesting style as an offensive coordinator. He's very patient. He's a teacher. He's not going to he's going to hold people accountable, but he's not the type that's going to be down somebody's throat. And it's a bit of a different approach from maybe some of the guys that we've seen here in the past in that role. That, you think of the success that Jason Moss and Jamie Elizondo had. I mean, they had great success here. So there's more than one way to do things, and Kahari is certainly a different approach, but a guy that is so well respected around the league for what he did as a player, and certainly what he's done now for a long time as a coach in this league. Yeah, it's great to see here in Ottawa, because the last 3 years are amongst the worst in CFL history when you talk about historically bad offenses. So not only has this team been bad for 3 years, they haven't been very entertaining for 3 years. And now to all of a sudden look at this team and say, okay, they're good, but they're also wildly entertaining. That to me is exactly what the doctor ordered to try and generate interest for this football team here in Ottawa.
Defensively, are you concerned about the performances? Is there something that has kind of been a common theme in the last 2 games with the number of points allowed, or is it just the way? I mean, we've seen games. That's just the way it goes. It's punch for punch. It's shot for shot. What have you seen the last 2 weeks defensively that encourages you and that you think might need some tweaking before Friday's game?
Well, against Winnipeg, I thought they did a fantastic job and kept the Bombers off the field in the second half. I believe they ran 11 plays in the third and fourth quarter, and a couple more in overtime. So, and you look at the first 4 games, in the 3 losses, Ottawa turned the ball over 14 times in those 3 games and only gave up 22 points a game. So pretty pretty good indication of how good the defense has been. My concern right now would be just the injuries in the secondary. Now, the good news is Sherrod Baltimore is back, and we'll see if he plays a bigger role this week. But, you're down your top two boundary corners that started the season. Money Hunter is regarded as one of the best in the Canadian Football League. Tore pec in training camp and as a long-term injury. And then Akeem Bailey's on the 6-game injured list as well. Justin Howell's on the 6-game injured list. You're starting safety. So they let go Patrick Levels at the start of the preseason as well. So they've had some losses in the secondary, and middle linebacker as well. They've gone through 3. Adam O'Clair started last week, and that's out of position for him. He's normally a weak side linebacker, but he started in the middle. Chizzy Umanakwe's hurt. Tyron Freda, who's a Dutchman that played at North Dakota and has been really good on special teams. He was excellent. He was excellent as a fill-in. He had 11 tackles one week, and then he got injured long-term as well. But the good news on that front, much like Shaq Evans on the offensive side of the ball, the guy that Ottawa went out and acquired in the offseason to replace the guy that was a fan favorite and a leader and a really good football player, and Avery Williams in the middle. But Jovan Santos Knox, an all-star in this league. And to go out and bring him in, I thought was a huge addition in the offseason, and we just haven't seen him play because of a hamstring problem. But much like Shaq Evans, brought off the 6-game injured list, and looks like he should be good to go this week, which would be a huge boost to this defense. But the front is excellent. The pressure that they're able to generate, starting with Lorenzo Malden, but Cleon Lang and Mike Wakefield in the middle, and Bryce Carter's already got 5 sacks as well. So, and Mike Fair has been absolutely fantastic for this team. You talk to players and you look at his resume, a couple of decades in the NFL as a coach and a scout, and coach big-time college programs as well. So that's been a big addition to this staff the last couple of years as well. So I think they need to clean some things up from last week in the secondary. For sure, got beat deep too many times, and special teams as well. I mean, they struggled week 1 against Montreal. They were pretty good. And, Bob Dice is noted as the best in the league in that department since he arrived here in 2016. Ottawa's teams, good, bad, or indifferent, have always been at or near the top when it comes to special teams in the league. Another rough week, a block punt that they allowed, a couple of big returns that they allowed. But you're never going to have a perfect football game. And in the end, they've got a couple of things that they definitely can work on going into this one against the Ticats.
It should be a fun one. Friday night under the lights in Ottawa. AJ will have the call for his respective station. And, of course, you listening on the Ticats Audio Network can listen to it right here on the Ticats Audio Network. AJ, really appreciate it. We'll see you very soon, my friend. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure, Louie.
And my thanks to AJ Jakubec from TSN 1200 in Ottawa for joining me on today's episode of Speaking with the Enemy, getting you set for Friday night's game. It is a 7:30 kickoff, which means Tiger Cats pregame presented by Greenworks will be on the air at 6:30. Bubba O'Neill, Andy Fantuz getting you set for the game before handing it off to RJ Broadhead and Luke Tasker, who will have the call. And hey, while you're here on the Ticats Audio Network, why don't you check out some of the other great shows we have for you, including a brand new episode of Ticats Today, which you can catch every day with my friend Braden Neville, doing a great job taking over the reins of that show. That'll do it for me today. We will be back next week to get you set for the Ticats and Alouettes. Hope you'll join us then. From all of us here at the Ticats Audio Network, I'm Louie Butko. Hope you have a great day.